Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, and thank you guys so much for joining us, whatever platform you're listening on, wherever it is that you're listening from. I'm always amazed by all of the support that we get, not just here within the United States, but all the people that we have who listen internationally as well. Always appreciate it. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for sharing. Really, I'm grateful for all of your support. Now, today's topic is one that a few listeners requested that I have a guest speak about, so I'm really excited about that. And if you ever have topics that you would like for me to have a guest discuss, by all means, shoot out a message, Twitter, email, Instagram, shoot us a message, and we'd be more than happy to make that happen. But as I said, today's topic is one that was requested, and it was the topic of coaching, for lack of a better term, what we would call like difficult players or tough players, or those players who maybe have an attitude, maybe who have a little bit of an ego, or maybe just haven't bought into the whole team environment, and how we can work with those players, get them bought in, make sure that they have a positive influence to be not only better people, but better teammates, and hopefully better adults in the future. So we're going to talk today about coaching those so-called tough players. So to help talk about this, I am very happy to be joined by Coach Carlos Evans. Coach, how are you today?
I'm blessed, Coach. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm very happy to have you on here, doing very well and ready to kind of get into it, Coach. So let's go ahead and start with an introduction to you, your basketball journey, your coaching journey, and kind of where the game has taken you.
I'm a native of Hobson City, Alabama, which is a small town. Like I guess you would say 35 minutes east of Birmingham. My journey kind of started, I've been playing since I was a kid, but in high school in the early 90s. And for me, I always knew I was going to be a high school coach. It's just something that I wanted to do. But once I graduated in 1994, things took a turn for me to where I was actually headed in the wrong direction. I didn't go to college. I actually got in some legal trouble, and it just took my world into a whirlspin. It was a very difficult time. Fast forward, I moved to Virginia in 2006. My wife was in the Army, and from there, I had a son who was in middle school when I started coaching Parks and Rec in Virginia. And one of the parents was like, "Man, you need, this is your calling." And I guess he can tell by the relationships that I have with kids. I just love kids. I think we have to pour so much into each. Every kid needs their own type of attention. So from there, I started coaching my son's travel team. And then in 2015, once my son graduated, I was given the opportunity to be a varsity assistant at James Monroe High School. And I worked my way up from varsity assistant to JV head coach. And this would be my 5th year as the varsity head coach. And needless to say, when I got into school in 2015, the principal came to me and said, "Are you interested in teaching? I just see your relationship with the kids. Would you be interested?" And I didn't start a career. I felt like my past was all negative. So it's I didn't think that I could ever be a teacher. So she told me what I needed to do because I had already started going back to school, and I ended up getting my bachelor's degree. And I'm a sports and entertainment marketing teacher and a personal finance teacher. And it's the best job in the world, man. There's nothing else that I want to do. This is me. I don't want to be a collegiate coach, because where I made the turn for the worst, I want to make sure that I can help keep my kids on track when they graduate and give them everything they need, the tools they need to be successful, so they can avoid the pitfalls that I faced when I was young.
And it ties well into our topic when you talked about your idea of wanting to, pour that love into kids and the
Right.
kids who need that, and like you said, kind of keep them on track and make sure that they are in a position to probably make the best decisions that they can make after high school and go on the path that best suits them. So, I'm with you too. I've had a couple people ask like, "Oh, do you want to coach like college or go to university?" I'm like, "No, not really." Like I get to teach and I get to coach at a high school, and it's to me like I can't think of a better job. I'm kind of in the same
Right.
boat as you are, so we're on the same wavelength with that, which is great. Now you talked about your teaching, and I found this personally interesting. So before we get into this topic, that you do teach things about personal finance as a finance educator. So I'm just curious, and maybe I could use some of this to talk to my players, and other coaches can as well. I want to just talk briefly about your work in finance education. And in your opinion, what do like teenagers, young players, what do they need to know about like their finances? What could even a basketball coach like kind of talk to them about to kind of get them in the right headspace when it comes to their finances?
Well, I mean, I know for a fact that every kid that come in my classroom, they don't see me as a teacher or a basketball coach.
Hmm.
And it's weird. They know that I coach and I'm a teacher,
Hmm.
but the relationships that I seek to build with all of the students, it's one that I feel like we're all a family. So I feel like I have their ears. And the first thing I talk to them about is success, because my definition of success and theirs are going to be they're all going to be different.
Hmm.
So when we talk about finances, there's so many things as far as insurance and 401ks, and it's just a wide variety of things that they have to learn. But I tell them that a lot they won't really understand it until they really get out there. And to
Hmm.
make sure that they stay away from credit cards and how to use credit cards to save your money. Because honestly, I'm one of those people that I value money, but money doesn't mean everything to me.
Sure.
And we have some students that's driven. They want the nice cars. And I let them know that if you want this, education is going to be important, but you got to save. And we only have so much time to talk about investments and things of that nature. But I learn more from the kids than they probably learn from me.
Yeah.
We have kids that struggle financially, but then we have some that's pretty, that they're already invested. I had one kid last year that bought a boat. And I'm like, I never bought a boat, you know.
Hmm.
So, but when it comes to finances, it's just to teach them to value money, because you're gonna need it to be successful and to save it. But money means different things to different people.
Mm.
I just told them that I'll be there, and if I don't know, I'll find this information out for you,
Yeah.
because there's so much about finances that we all don't know. I think we're
Sure.
all.
Sure. I mean, we're all learning all the time, and I think that it's like as you said, I can learn just as much from them as they can probably learn from me, and I think it kind of ties back into like you talked about, like knowing your players and like getting to know them and the kind of that family environment, and then you get to understand like, okay, like what's your goals? Like what do you want to do like after high school? Okay, if this is what you want to do, well, what sort of financial situation do you need to be in? What sort of plan do you have to make in order for that to end up happening? And so I think it is interesting when you talk to your players or talk to your students or whatever environment you're in to like really get a sense of like, hey, like what do you want to do after high school? Like where are you going to go, and what type of things do you want? And I've had players like you who like want like nicest car, nicest house in the world, but I've also had players who are just like, money's whatever. I mean, maybe their maybe their thought might change, but like some of them are not, don't seem to be that motivated by money, and that's not a bad thing either.
Not.
No, that's not a bad thing either. All right, so now with our topic here about this concept of coaching, tough players, I think that everybody kind of has their own definition of what that means and what that looks like for you. So this is something that you mentioned that you do have experience about. So let's sort of start with in your own words. Let's sort of define it in your own words. Like what is a tough player? What is that to you?
Well, there's two definitions. You have where you have your rough and violent kids that, they're
Yeah.
tough. And then you have, the kids that's strong enough to handle adverse situations.
Hmm.
That kid. I think the latter, we all want those kids that's just tough mentally, and they, you know, you can put them in any situation and they'll thrive because mentally they can handle it. But when it comes to tough players, as far as like, the attitudes and things of that nature, I feel like every coach should have a standard. And I hear coaches say all the time, man, these kids are different. That makes me more upset than anything, because I feel like us as coaches have changed. We have to, the old school coaches, they held us to a standard. And I think we, the so-called new school coaches, we have to start creating that standard to where, if you get a kid, first of all, I always tell a kid, if you want to play for us and you want to be part of our program, you have to meet our standard. Our standard is not going to reach you. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times when I get a kid and they end up making the team because they're basically faking change. Once they make the team, they're doing what they have to do till they make the team, and you can kind of see that the attitude starting to rear their head.
Yeah,
you have to hold them to a standard, and a lot of times they won't play. Some kids you can run them all day, and that's not going to help. But a lot of times what I find is that you have to really sit down with that kid and to see why these things are happening. And I think that's the thing that's been beneficial to me, is that I'm willing to take the time, me and my staff, to sit down with these kids to say, this is what we see. And you're not going to be part of this program moving forward because of this. I have to always protect my young players from older players that have these attitudes. So, that's the big thing, is just sitting down, because a lot of times these kids, they're kids. And we often forget that. I tell teachers all the time, we often forget that we were young, the things that we used to do in school, Mm-hmm. So I never forget where I come from, and I never forget how I was as a kid. So, I don't hold them to a same standard that I would as an adult, because I think kids, they all need attention. And a lot of times that kid, I'll give a tough kid maybe I say, I'm going to start you this game just to see how you respond, because maybe that's why they're acting out. They feel like they should start. And if it don't work well, it's like, you got work to do. Don't blame that on me.
Yeah, sure.
It's not a one. Every kid is an individual, and I think you have to treat each as such. You have to really dive into each kid to see what's going on.
Right. And what you talked about, I think is really important, whether it's in the classroom or on the court, is about standards and what the standard is for you as a coach and the standard for you as a program. And I think that hopefully, whether or not, that player right away kind of buys into it, at least they're aware of what that standard is. So I want to circle back to that for you and your program. What are some of the standards that your program sets, so that, even those tough players have to know, like, okay, at least I know, like, here's what the standard is. What are yours?
First of all, they have to be disciplined, and I don't do the trouble. You're not going to get into fights in school. You're not going to be disruptive in the classroom. You're going to make it to class on time. You're going to make it to practice on time. And I know everybody's circumstance is different, where kids have to stay after and they can't make it or whatever. But I feel like we have, from the beginning, you have to basically draw a line and say, this is how we're going to do things. Mm-hmm. And every coach is different in what they expect. But I think we all can agree that we want our kids to basically focus on the academics. We want the academic, that's big. That's first. And then just character. And we can work out the other things, the basketball side of it. Because everything when we talk about standards, not necessarily basketball. We'll deal with that on the court. Mm-hmm. But it's the things outside of basketball. So I always tell a kid, if I go to just some random people that know you and I mention your name, what are the first things they're going to tell me about you? And that makes a kid think, because they don't think that way. But sure. It's, to me, our job is amazing, because you get to see the growth in these kids. You get kids coming in as freshmen, and to watch them mature, and they're going out into the real world, and they're better because they come through your program. Mm-hmm. And they've learned so much. We spend a lot of time in the classroom with our team. Me being a teacher, I have that benefit of having a whiteboard. We get in there and we close the doors. And today, this topic is about sex. today this topic is about gangs. This topic is about drugs. These are things that's out there awaiting you. How do you avoid, you know, someone like me who I had 2 kids in high school by 2 different women. And this because I had no father in the house. I wasn't educated. My mom had no idea what I was doing. And I have a great mom, but she was a mother of 4, working her butt off to trying to make sure we had food on the table. And I was just out here experimenting because that's what my friends were doing. And I had to pay a heavy price. And I think when kids hear that you have experienced all of this,
Mm-hmm.
their ears tend to open up. And it's like, you know, a lot of times be like, he has no idea what he talking about. He never been in our shoes. And I tell them I've probably been in worse situations than y'all will ever be in. So, you know, a lot of times I do have that benefit of having experienced so much, and I can relate to the worst of kids.
And to, again, don't want to generalize, but with some of the experiences that you've had with some of these players who may be you know, those so-called like tough players are the ones that need that extra love poured into them. In general, have you found that there's a lot of other stuff that's going on outside of the court that it's important for you to kind of just be aware of and understand that maybe some of the way that they're acting is because of the environment or the circumstances outside of basketball?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Most of them, they, you know, I've had kids that come out and I've built that relationship and they come to me. And these are some of the kids that people will say the worst kids in the school. Those are probably the kids that I'm closest to. Because, you know, they come to you and say, Coach, I ain't gonna be able to follow your rules, but I appreciate you. You know, and I still, to this day, you know, kids have gone on and they end up graduating and they still will call me and tell me they appreciate the talks that we had and, you know, kind of telling me the things that they have going on. So, you know, yeah, a lot of times the kids, you know, I've had homeless kids, I've had, you know, kids in abusive houses. I've had it all. And but a lot of times the kids that's just really got issues, they probably won't make it because the issues just too great for me to even deal with. They're not gonna come to school, they're not gonna do the things, and then they just can't be a part of what we're doing.
And I think that it's important as a coach to have a little bit of awareness of that, in that, you know, if you're a coach and if probably, you know, you have some other job, whether it's a teacher, other job that you're doing, and then you have things, you know, within your personal life, your family and everything, like you get stretched pretty thin pretty quick. And to, you know, you want to do the best that you can, especially for those players who are, you know, in maybe really difficult situations. But sometimes, like what you said earlier, like you might not have the resources or the time or whatever to really be able to help them in the way you want to, but maybe you can find somebody who can, or maybe you can connect them with somebody who is a good resource for them to go to. And like you said, sometimes like just basketball just isn't going to be something they can do if they are, you know, in a sense, fighting for their survival and fighting just to make it through every day. I think it's important for coaches to realize that too as well.
Yeah, if you don't know your kids, you know, you're gonna, to me, I mean, what are you really doing this for? Because I mean, winning is a byproduct. If you have a relationship with your kids, that's just like anybody. If I have a relationship with you, I'm willing to go the extra mile for you. I'm willing to do more for you, as opposed if I don't have a relationship and I feel like you just want me to go out and help you win, or, you know, it's like it really doesn't matter at that point. And I've been in those situations where I felt like a coach didn't really care about me as a person because they never visited. They didn't know the things that we were going through. And, you know, the benefit I have is that, you know, a lot of these kids may come from rough neighborhoods. I can always show up in these neighborhoods. I can always, because I'm not just a teacher, the kids are going to vouch for me, and they're going to all come and speak because I'm willing to go out of my comfort zone to meet them in their communities, to go to their homes to see how they look, you know, how they're living. And to me, that matters to parents, because once now you have some parents that's gonna, you know, they're gonna use you, and they'll try to stretch you thin because they constantly need. But I think you have to have a cutoff point, and, you know, you don't want to coddle a kid and just, you know, do everything for them. I want to teach them how to do it. And tell them things that they need to do, as opposed to me continue to take your kid. You know, it's nothing worse than you dropping a kid off from practice and the cars are in the yard. You can come and get your child. This is not my job. So this year I have a policy where I'm not picking up a kid and taking a kid home. You need to call a teammate, or your parents need to work it out, because a lot of times they will take advantage of it. But some kids they can't have to, and then I'll deal with those kids accordingly. So
I think you do bring up a really good point that it's something that I considered as somebody who as a couple times not really coached in an environment where I lived in, and I think it was really important for my players to kind of see me like out in the neighborhood or like out in the area, or see them outside of a basketball setting, because I think it is true, especially for those tougher players, because in my experience, and you could probably speak to this too, a lot of those players who may be the ones that we consider to be more difficult, they do have, in my experience, a lot of them have issues with like trust, and they don't necessarily trust, especially when it comes to adults, that maybe they've had adults who've lied to them, or adults who just haven't been there or been absent. And so if you think that you have a player at 15 years old who's had almost like 15 years of experience of that, then a player or a coach who's coming in that they're meeting for the first time, like that trust will not be there. Like it's an investment, kind of like what you've talked about. Like you really have to invest and understand that these kids may not have had the best adults in their life, some of them, and that you're gonna have to earn it. You're gonna have to work for it, for sure.
Yeah, and I mean it goes both ways. I want them to earn my trust. I don't come in expecting every kid, just because I'm the coach, this is the way we're gonna do it. It's not the way I work. So it's like, I want to earn your trust, but I also have to model and to be a man of my word. I've had kids call me out at halftime because we was in a tournament, and one of my best offensive players, I kept telling him, if you're going to be selfish and this and that, I'm going to sit you. And one of the kids, I let them speak up, and he said, Coach, you said you was going to sit him. He's being selfish. And I said, you know what, you're right. But I think the kids, kids will hold you accountable. Sure. And they know that I'm in charge, and, I'm running the program, but I want to make this experience for them one of the best experiences. And I'm not going to allow one player to be disruptive and just mess it up for everybody. That, to me, that can't happen. Mm-hmm. And I think coaches have to make decisions that's for the betterment of the program. And I tell parents that all the time, like, your priority is your son. My priority is the program. Mm-hmm. So we're never going to see eye to eye. We just have different priorities.
Sure. Yeah. And that actually ties right into the next question I was going to ask about, one of the things I know some coaches, they get concerned about is when they have a team where, the team culture and the team chemistry is pretty positive, and everything's like is running pretty smooth. And then there's this concern about, if this tougher player, or this player with more of an attitude comes on board, and then they're worried about, disrupting that environment, and now worried about what that's going to do to team culture and team chemistry. So I wanted to ask you, like, how do you, maintain that positive culture and make sure that the players, understand, like, okay, this is what we're doing, here's our culture, this is what we expect, while also like knowing that, okay, this tougher player is going to maybe be coming in, and it's going to take them a little bit longer potentially to kind of get with the culture and the standards and really buy in. How do you kind of balance when maybe like everybody else seems to be ready to go and good, and then you have a player who's just taking more time to buy in?
Yeah, it's difficult. It's not easy. Every year is different. Yep. Because a lot of times when you're filling out your roster and you're having your coaches meetings, and you kind of know, I've had kids, a tougher player who he just gets everybody going, whether they're afraid of him or it's like, we can use that to kind of, to get everybody going. But then halfway through the year, because a lot of times you don't know what goes on in your locker room. You're not there all the time. You don't really know the dynamics that the kids have amongst each other when you're not there.
Yeah.
So, I try to be transparent, and I ask the kids to be transparent, to where I'll come in throughout the season and I'll get our captains, I'll get kids who basically are the last one on the bench and ask them, what do they think the chemistry is? What do they think we are as a team? And then they would be honest and say, I feel like this person is dragging us down because he has these people following him, and I feel like we divided type thing. I'll address it. I'll address it as a group. And if we don't get it fixed, I'm quick to tell a player, you probably don't have a future in this program after this season. I'll get through it and do what I have to do. And I've had kids transfer. I had kids leave. And I've had kids that's just turn it around, and they understand, and they've been good for the program.
Yeah. And so I think that is a big concern, that the player can like divide a team, or just kind of, have so much influence that, the more of the negative things that they might be doing might be, dragging people in the wrong direction. And so, like you said, I think it's really important to kind of talk to your players and kind of get a feel of what's going on, because like you said, there's a lot of other things that go on when you're not there, when you're not around in the locker room, or you're not around in those situations. A lot of other things take place for sure. And it sounds like for you, like there's a certain point where it's almost like not worth it. Like you're not going to risk all of this that you've built with everybody else just because you want to work with this player. And like if this player at a certain point like isn't getting with it, or isn't following the standards, then maybe that your program isn't right for them. I'm sure, like you said, it's different for everybody, but it sounds like to you that there's a certain point where it's almost like this relationship isn't working. Am I right in thinking that?
Absolutely. And, I have this term, and I tell my coaches, we have to protect the babies. And what that means is that a lot of times the juniors and seniors aren't easily influenced by no one. It's always the younger players, and I always keep a great deal of young players in my program. So I have to make sure when I look at these young players, who's influencing these young players?
Sure.
And that, because the older players, they've been through there. Usually if you're a junior or senior with me, you've come through the program. So you kind of understand what I expect. So if it's just a kid that's coming in, if my upperclassmen aren't holding them accountable, then I have to,
Yeah.
And then it's all about protecting the babies. I'm always looking, because if these kids are going to come up through my program, I need for people to lead them the right way, in a positive. So, I can be honest. I haven't had, I probably can count on maybe 3 or 4 kids that were kind of, negative influences, and they never lasted. They didn't last. And, it is, and I still have a relationship with them. They respect me. It's just one of those things that I tell them, like, this is my job, and I have to make sure that I maintain this experience for all of the kids in our program. Not that I don't love you, but you just don't fit in what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
And I will help you to make sure that you graduate if it's something you want to do. And a lot of times kids don't know how to take that. It's like, he don't want me to play, but he's still willing to help me for me.
Yeah.
And I tell them they miss out, because I feel like it's so much that they can learn from being in our program. So
sure.
Yeah, I can still give you that outside of our program.
Right. You haven't like written them off completely as people or anything like that.
And I see so many coaches do that, Coach. And I just think that these are kids. I think we've all seen kids I know a lot of kids that I thought either was going to end up in jail or dead. That's the direction they were headed in. And then they turned out to be, entrepreneurs, businessmen, and they're doing well. So, we kids, people change, especially kids. They need sometimes they need a little pick me up, and they need a little direction. So I'm not going to write a kid off because he doesn't fit in what we're trying to do with our program.
Right. Because it's not, you're not just looking at them as like, you're just a basketball player. And if you're not a basketball player, then you don't exist to me. It's like, well, you're still a person. You're still a person who you know, you care about. You put some time into them, you know, to try and get them, you know, with basketball. And if it didn't work out, there was still an investment that you had. You still care about that person. So you still want them to be successful. And, you know, maybe they're just not in a position where it's going to work with basketball, but that doesn't mean that they can't be successful elsewhere in life and can't do
Absolutely.
other things, of course. Yeah. No, I completely agree with that thinking. Now, to kind of move this into a slightly different direction, we also coach, you know, what we consider like tougher players who maybe they are bought in, you know, maybe they are bought in and they really want to do well, and they want to be a part of the program, and they just have situations where, you know, they struggle with being on time, or maybe they, you know, kind of lash out at practice or lash out in a game, you know, every once in a while. It just sort of flares up like that. So I'm just curious about your experience of like what needs to happen and what you try to do with those players who you can see, like, I know that they're trying, but they're just having those lapses and those struggles.
I honestly, I haven't had very many of those, but I also, when I see a kid kind of going through that, I make sure I talk to the players about it too, and we do that. I've sat in circles to where there was no basketball discussed, but it was more so tapping into the things that really, you know, that's really at the heart of the kids that make them upset, the things in their personal lives that really, you know, a lot of them was like, my dad passed away, or, you know, I feel like my dad never really been here for me and my mom doesn't give me any attention. And you dive into it. And what I've learned is that a lot of times the teammates, if you have a strong program, the team, the other guys can rally around this kid to make them feel like they're part of something. And that's what I've done in the past. It's just more so, if I got one of those kids, I'm letting everybody know, like, this kid, like he needs y'all to support him and be there. And it's worked,
Hmm.
you know. And I mean, it would have to be a situation I haven't had. Like, a kid knows that I don't take. You're not gonna backtalk me. You're not gonna. It's certain things I tell them I will not be disrespected, because that's not gonna look good for you. Like, and so we don't really have that, you know. I've enjoyed these past 4 years, has been amazing. The
Hmm.
kids, and, you know, a lot of kids haven't even, if they don't play basketball. I know a lot of kids are not going to go to college to play ball, but at least go to the college or the military, and we're going to talk about it. Like, I want you to be able to do something with yourself, and you're not going to sit around and work at Walmart. If that's what you choose to do, it's fine, support it. But if you got higher aspirations, I'm going to help you get there. I'm going to tell you what you need to do,
Yeah.
and I'm going to pull my resources together, and, you know, to get those kids where they need to be.
And I think that with just having your players, you know, sort of talk to each other and kind of talk as a team, like, you really get a lot of like good information about things that are going on, and that, you know, some of our players are in need of a support system from their peers, especially, and they need to know that, you know, they have people who are there for them. And I think it's great, and it definitely need like a coach and an adult figure to do that. But we also have, and I know I do too, and I'm sure you do as well, you know, we have a lot of players who they need like good peers as well. Like people in their neighborhood, or people maybe around them, like that are their age, are not good influences, and maybe don't necessarily have like a great vision or plan, or any plan for what they're going to do like in the future, and that's all that they see around them. And so it sounds like to you what's important is that they also have, you know, people their age who can kind of build each other up and kind of, you know, make sure that hopefully that they're staying on the right track.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. You know, I remember having, and this is before I got to the high school, when I was coach at AAU, I invited a kid to my house to eat dinner with me and my family. And we were, I remember the meal. We had spaghetti and salad, and we're sitting at the table, and he just paused. He said, "Hold up." He said, "I have never sat at a table to eat with my family, ever." And to me, those things, you don't know if you don't actually tap into these kids. Because to me, if I can be that guy, that man that sparks a kid to be very successful and happy, I'm gonna pat myself on the back, you know,
Hmm.
because I think that's so important. I think we all should work to leave a legacy, and it's not even based on wins and losses. How
Sure.
many kids actually come back and communicate with you? How many kids want to know how you're doing? And when you see them, they talk about the fun that they had just playing for you. And they can actually just come up to you because it's real. You know, my kids, like I said, they know that I'm a coach, I'm a teacher, but I think they respect me as a person because I make sure that I carry myself in a respectful way, and I respect them, who they are and what they are.
Yeah.
And I just want to help them, whatever they seek. How can I help you? How can I help you reach your goals?
And that story that you mentioned, I have one that's almost exactly like that, but it's almost in like in the opposite direction, in which I had a player who said the same thing, that they had really never like really sat down to like eat a meal with their family. And what I thought was so interesting about that particular person was that their parents were active, they were involved, it seemed, in their kids' life, but they were just so, busy, and I put that in quotes, whether it was with work or other things, that they never did it. And this was a well-off, pretty affluent like neighborhood I know that this kid lived in. I think they were doing pretty well financially, and so it could be any player, it could be any sort of player who has a situation like that, even if like everything looks like it's all together, even like there could be things going on, like, and I think you don't want to make assumptions. And just like on the other end, you don't want to make assumptions, I think, with players who you're like, oh, I know what sort of neighborhood that they come in, but you meet their family and they're doing pretty well and they're providing as best as they can and they have good influences that way. So like no real assumptions, I think, either way. It's kind of just all come down to getting to know your players.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that we all make in general, is that we always assume. And we have to get to know. We gotta know. And I think that's what separates the good coaches from the great coaches.
So I think that one of the things I'm sort of getting from when you're describing your team and describing your program is that players, kind of before they even come in or before they try out, they kind of already know like the standard, and they know like, okay, like if I'm gonna go play basketball, like I know that this is going to happen. And it feels like this has saved you like a lot of time and has maybe saved you a lot of conversations, because it's out there, and everybody like kind of knows like what your program is. So I just kind of wanted to like touch on that like briefly. Is that something that took you a bit of time to do, to kind of get like the message out about what your program stands for? What was that process of like getting everybody to kind of know, even if they didn't play basketball, to like know like, okay, I know that this is what Coach Evans' program is all about?
Right. I think the biggest thing is that, I make sure that I establish relationships with parents. I think that's so important. If you're willing to show up and support your kid, I know you love your kid. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. And I make sure for the parents, I model. They're not gonna ever see me out doing things in the community, drinking and hey. I come home, I'm a family man.
Yeah.
And not only that, I think the kids speak for me. A lot of my players, I've had kids come to me and say, so and so told me that I shouldn't even try out. And I'm like, why did they say that? And then I talked to the kid, it was like, he's lazy. Like, you're not gonna put up with that. Like, or he doesn't, like, he's the jerk in the classroom. Like, I tell them that Coach Evans is not gonna put up with that. So I think a lot of times, when kids come up through our program and they come through our camps, they get a feel of what we're about. And they kind of see the transformation in a lot of those kids that come through our program. And, you can see the maturity level. And I see a lot of those young guys at our games, and to see them, enter our school as freshmen, it's like, man, these kids been watching us for a long time. So we got to make sure that, we doing things the right way. So, they want to be a part of what we're doing.
Yeah. And like the message kind of gets out. And so it sounds like it's really helpful that, even those incoming freshmen, they've probably had an opportunity to like either see your program or, hear about your program and understand like, oh, like, okay, this is what it's going to be. And I think that also what you mentioned is like your players, especially those upperclassmen, if they can say that message and they can let those younger players know even before they think about trying to try out for your program, like what better thing is there than that? If your players are the ones doing the talking and letting them know what's going on. And so I guess just, to kind of pivot a little bit too, to, you know, we kind of talk about tough players. And your experience with parents, has that always been like kind of smooth because the expectations are there? Has there been some work that you've had to do maybe with even getting like parents on board? How's that process been?
It's been a mix. It's
Hmm.
been mixed because I mean, for the most part, overall, I have good parents.
Sure.
You have some that, some think their son are superstars because they're the best player on my team, and you can get kids that transfer out. But for the most part, it's been okay because I'm willing to have an honest conversation with them. I don't need an administrator or anybody there with me. Let's cool down and let's sit down and let's talk about it. And I always tell my parents to, before you come to me, let's teach these young men how to advocate for themselves. If they're not playing or they're unhappy, my door is always open. Like, I'm not a person that they can't come and talk to. So when they come to you and they complain, how about you tell them to come and talk to me, and then they can relay that information to you. And that cuts down a lot of frustration, because if they don't learn how to advocate for themselves, what happened when they leave here? And they looking for mom and dad to save them, and mom and dad can't go and argue with the real world. There's no person there. So for the most part it works, but then you find some parents that's just over the top, and I just take it with a grain of salt, because to me, I think that's more about the parent than myself. And a lot of times I found that kids are okay. The kids have already talked to me, and the parents just can't let go. The parents have their issues with everything, or playing time, or how I'm coaching their kid. But the kids are fine,
Hmm.
because the kids can tell me that you're right. And, then I realized that there's a disconnect at home with the parent and the child.
Yeah.
So, but I always say I'm not coaching parents. I will speak to parents, but I'm not coaching parents.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
continue to coach these kids.
And I found that too. I think I've really learned that over the past few years, how that disconnect can definitely exist between where the players are at and where the parents are at, and that the conversation you can have with one of your players might be a wildly different conversation than you would have with their parents. Like, oh, so it's like maybe this parent's really upset, but the kid's perfectly fine. Kid's just happy
Exactly.
to be on the team and happy to be around all their friends and happy to be working hard and being around the game. And it's like the parents who are the ones who seem to have an issue, and that's an issue that's a lot different. And I like what you mentioned about having kids advocate for themselves, because I try and I tell my players and my students as well, like, if you don't speak, you're going to be spoken for. And so if you want to have a voice, like, you need to communicate with me. And it sounds like that's something for the most part players know with you, like, the door's open, like, let's just have a conversation, let's like hear what's going on, and let's see if we can figure something out. And I think that one of the things that really helps you too, and so I just want to kind of touch on this as well, is that it's really important for you also as a coach to be holding yourself to the same standards that you're holding your players to. I'm just curious for you, and on that level, is that something that you're always kind of mindful of, like, okay, these are the standards I know I need to be holding myself to? Or is it like something where you don't have to be thinking about it because you already know that you conduct yourself a certain way? I guess I'm just curious about you holding yourself to those same standards.
Yeah, I do. I'm always on time. I'm always punctual. If I say it, I mean it.
Sure.
Um, and I'm a doer. I have a lot of my kids come to my classroom, and that's different in itself, because I can see them outside of the court, off the court, and see how they conduct themselves. Of course, in my classroom, they're gonna behave a certain way, but I make sure that, man, when I look in the mirror, I know who I am, and I always feel like I live right, because I mean, I'm a spiritual guy. So my validation, I only need validation from God. I don't need no validation from other people. I just don't. So I make sure that every day when I wake up, that I'm a faithful husband, I'm the best father I can be, I'm the best son, I'm the best coach, and the best teacher I can be every single day. And I feel good about that. And a lot of people, I feel like I have somewhat of a mystique, because the people never see me unless I'm in the community doing something in the community, or maybe I see a bunch of kids out, and I go out, you know, and just say hello to the kids. But I feel like I live right. So the coaching and everything else come easy. So when it comes to a standard, I live by a certain standard, and you know, I stand on it. It's
Sure.
just who I am.
Sure. And I think I think that's important for a coach to just be also thinking about when you think about, you know, setting the standards for your team and what you want your team to be held accountable. It's like, well, what do you as a coach, what do you as a person stand for? Like, what matters to you? What are the things that you value, and what are the things that you as well are holding yourself to? So that way the players understand that, like, oh yeah, well, coach is right along with me, that, you know, I can't say that coach isn't doing these things because he's always on time, or, you know, always acting a certain way. And I'm right there with you on the punctuality thing. That's huge for me. I know for me personally, like, being on time, like, that matters. Tardiness, like, drives me crazy. So we're on the same boat with that. Great. So I want to talk about here some success stories, because I know that's always fun to be able to kind of share. Do you have some stories of whether it's like with teams or players, of, you know, things that may have looked a certain way at the beginning, but by the end, like, things were turned out really well? Do you have any stories of that you could share?
I have one now that's man, I actually get chills just talking about him. This kid is 5'8", and that's a stretch. You know, I think it was his father passed away in 2014, and he came to one of our basketball camps, and he was trying to fight one of our players who was assistant at camp. He ended up punching an administrator and got sent to alternative school in middle school. So this kid was like, he was pretty bad off. And he made the team. He made the JV team as a freshman. He didn't know anything about basketball. He just, you know, we kept him because, I guess, because he was so little. It's like, man, let's try to help him. And he has put in work. I mean, the kid, if you just look at his academics over the past 4 years, like, he's an AB student now. And last night we had a workout, and I had a junior college coach stop by the gym, and he just said, "Who is that?" And I already knew this kid has one of the prettiest jump shots in the state of Virginia, just because of he works. He works, and he really cares about basketball. And to get this kid in school, you know, I just told a Division III coach that I'll talk about this kid for the rest of my career, because I've seen him grow from this kid who lost his father, alternative school, bad grades, attitude, and to see the maturity. He can carry a conversation now. And I mean, he still has work to do, but, you know, he FaceTimes me so late sometimes. I said, listen, I got a wife and kid. I have kids and a wife at the house. You need to hear me. And he'll laugh. But, you know, to me, that's what it's all about. And I credit that not only to myself and the coaches, the teachers being supported, the guidance counselors being supportive and understanding, you know, what our program is about. And this kid is, you know, man, I don't know. He just makes me smile when I think of him, because he's so small, but he's tough. He's the toughest kid that I've had in this program.
Yeah. Wow. That's, you know, that's one of those where you kind of realize, like, it's all sort of been worth it. It seems. Yes. Like, everything has been worth it. And so was it with that particular player and other players as well? Was it just, you know, making sure that you, like, stay the course and just keep the conversations going? Or was there a lot of conversations you had to have with that particular player along the career? Like, what was the kind of the process of keeping this player on the right track and helping him stay the course?
A lot of conversations.
Sure.
A lot of conversations with me and my staff, and to, you know, the kid has trust issues, you know, and he's willing to talk about his father and how he felt through that time. And, you know, he laughs. And even one of the teachers at the alternative school, he said, you know, the kid came to the school, and he said, I told him, you know, I was trying to get him, correct him, and he cursed me out and told me that he would whoop my, you know, and I just walked up to him, and he was fist balled up, and he wants to fight me so bad. He said, I squeezed him and told him I loved him. He said after about 5 minutes, the kid fell asleep. So the kid even laughs because he's like, man, I can't even believe like I was that person. So it's a process though, but a lot of it's just conversation. I can pull up in the community that he lives in, and it's not the greatest community, but everybody in that community respects him because they say all he want to do is play basketball. He's not interested in anything else, and I think that says a lot. So I said, man, this kid really cares. I need to give him a little more. And he's the one that I'll be like, hey, I'm coming to get you. Let's go get something to eat. And he's just a special kid, and I think I see special in all of my kids. Although my relationship with each kid is different, as if I got 5 children, so all of my relationship, I love them all the same, but they all have different needs.
Sure.
They're all different. So my players are the same. But this kid is, I'm just excited about his future and and what he become. I told you it's just the beginning. So
yeah.
He hangs on to every word I say too. So it's like I know that I gotta be right because I'm not gonna lie to him. I'm always honest with him. So
sure. And I think that's a good point too, is like if you have a player who like really like looks up to you and really needs you for guidance, then just kind of be aware of like, oh, like I got to make sure that I'm on point and everything like that too, because the player's kind of counting on me maybe as a role model or as like a guide as to how an adult should behave, or what an adult even looks like. And it could be a lot of responsibility. It could be a little overwhelming at times, but I think you and I kind of both agree, like there's kind of nothing greater than that feeling of knowing that a player feels that way, and like you have the opportunity to kind of make that impact on them. And
absolutely.
It also sounds like too what helps you in this process of whether it's coaching what we would call tough or difficult players. It sounds like when you look at a player, you are looking at where you think they can be and where they could get, rather than like almost how they are in the moment. Like
absolutely.
Am I right in thinking that you're kind of seeing like, I know that this is where we can get you, this is where you're at right now, but let's work together because I see this for you in the future?
Absolutely. I think a lot of times when you say tough players, we have to stop focusing on the tough, because I think there's good in every kid. There's a reason why that kid is labeled as a tough kid. So I focus on the good. Like what is I pay attention to how they interact and with their peers in the school, and I'm just like, how can I tap into that? And if they're in our program, it makes it a lot easier because I have time and I can spend more time, as opposed to if they're not playing with us, I'm not going to have as much time devoted to a kid because we're practicing and it's constantly basketball.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I try to see the good in everyone until they show me different.
Mm-hmm.
That's even with adults. So when it comes to kids, I'm like, these are kids. Like they can change. No kid is, you're not the way you was in high school. No one, if you are, something is wrong, So I always look at the future of the kid and see what do they want to do. If they don't know, I'm like, okay, you got time. But if you don't know, then how about you ever considered doing this?
Mm-hmm.
And I've had kids join, I have 2 kids that's in the Marine Corps. And I remember one coming to me and in the class, he said, Coach, I need to talk to you like right now. And we're in the classroom and it's just me and him. And he talks about, he's depressed. He's going through depression. And, I'm not an expert on depression, but at the same time, I told him that I truly appreciate him coming to me about that. Mm-hmm. Because he didn't know if he wanted to he had an opportunity to play Division III football, and then he had the armed forces there, and he chose the Marine Corps, and it's been good. And he shouted me out on Twitter, which actually brought tears to my eyes, because he said, when a coach cares more about the person that you are as opposed to you being a player, it means everything. And to me, that's what it's all about. Because I've never met this kid. Parents, senior night, he had friends walk him to get his senior award, and I didn't even get into where are your parents, because to me, you don't, I told him, if you go into service, like it's going to be a struggle, but it's so much you can learn, and you don't have to stay there a lifetime. But you work hard as anyone, and you can figure it out as you go. But once you get out of the Marine Corps, you will be better off than if you didn't go and
Sure.
you just kind of sat around. So that's been a good thing. And I say, if it don't work out, don't blame me. I'm just telling you, because you have to make this decision. Like, we all have options, and once you make a decision, stick to it, and look as a lesson if you feel like it didn't work out. You never make mistakes when you're trying to do something to better yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, make the decision, like if that's a decision that you feel comfortable with, great, let's do it. And if it doesn't work out, like that's okay. Like that there will be other decisions now, other paths that we can make as well. And I think that's really important too. And I really like that message again when a coach cares more about the player or the person than the player. Like, you would think that a lot of coaches feel that way, but sometimes it's good just to hear that, recognition and understand that, like, my players know that I care more about them as people. Like, I think I was preaching that message, but okay, I'm glad that you guys got that too.
Right.
So always good to have that reassurance. Yeah, absolutely. So to wrap up, Coach, there's a couple questions that I ask every guest here. So I'll start with this first one. What is a coaching moment from your coaching career that you think others listening would be able to learn from?
Coach, to be honest, I don't even think I have a moment, because I think every season with every player is a moment within itself.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that I always say is that life is short, and to me, the one thing I think a lot of times with coaches, and a lot of people don't throw the word love out a lot, but if you ever around me, even my friends and my family, I just tell everybody I love them, and I do, and I think from my moments, I think that the moment that you tell a kid that and you really mean it, it matters. And listen to them and tell them that you love them, and continue to build that relationship. And that, that goes a long way. I feel like it's helped me, because I've had a kid who was homeless that played for me. He couldn't, because we had a 2.0 policy at our school, and the kid never could meet the grade. By the time we get the basketball season, he never played. But my first year was his senior year. And I worked with that kid because he said, Coach, I want to play for you. Because I had already established that relationship before. I want to play for you. So, I just kind of say, hey, you got to make sure that your grades are good. And he made the team. And he was the first kid in his family, the first person in his family to get a high school diploma. And they were living in a hotel, him and his brother. So to me, the kid knew. And to this day, when he sees me, he just runs to me. And he's a big kid, and his brothers graduated this past year, and he was like, "Look, we all got our diplomas." And to me, that's so special, because he told his brothers about me. So the time that they were in school, although they didn't play for me, the relationship was there. So if they ever got into any trouble, I'm one of the few people that they can come to. And I'm hoping that they figured out, but I felt like I've done the best I could, and those kids knew that I care.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I just picturing this kid running to you.
Right.
That's funny, but no, that's great. And those little moments there where like that message connects, and it's, yeah, I mean, those are the best moments, like you said. Those are great. Thank you for sharing that. So, to wrap up, then, what I tell every guest is I give them what I call like my 60-second soapbox, where they can discuss, get out a final thought, a closing message, a final idea to kind of leave our listeners with. So, Coach, I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor to kind of give out that 60-second soapbox for that message.
Well, for me, I had to build this up, because I think
Sure.
we all want to win championships.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I think if every coach look at every player's relationship as a championship, you'll fill up your trophy case. Because to me, that just a trophy, I can go in any hardware store or sports store and buy me a trophy. But the experience and the relationship that you have with each individual kid, to me, is more valuable than any trophy that you can win. So for any coach that's listening to this, my thing is, if you want championships, start with every player on your bench, even your managers and your coaches, and I promise you, like, this job will be well worth it.
Wow, I'm surprised I've never heard of that quote before because it's such a good one about just like the way you define championships.
Yes.
That's really good. That is.
I have a lot, coach. I do.
Yeah. No, that's, I mean, when you think about it that way, like my trophy case is pretty full.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, that's really good. And I think it just ties all back into, you know, what do you define success as? Like, what is your ultimate goal? And, you know, when you think about coaching basketball, like, oh, you know, this ultimate goal is to build a championship. But if your ultimate goal is to, you know, make an impact and a positive influence on kids' life, then how many championships do we have already?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I like that a lot, and I think that's great, and that's a great way to kind of leave us off with. So yeah, that's a really good quote. I like that a lot. So, Coach, I want to thank you for spending some time, you know, talking about kind of your experience and talking about, you know, we started about talking with, you know, what we call tough players, but, you know, just so much more about just relationships and, you know, putting your heart into these kids and pouring your love into these kids, and just all the great success stories that we talked about as well. So I think that this was really great, really fulfilling, really enriching, and just a lot to you know, really think about and hopefully use in the best manner going forward. So Coach Evans, thank you so much for spending some time talking about this. Best of luck going forward, and just keep doing up the great work that you're doing.
All right. Thanks for having me again, Coach, and you stay safe and continue the good work.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. And thank you guys so much for listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Thank you guys. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.